Los vecinos la evitaban al verla pasar. Todos escuchaban con disimulo, desconfiando unos de otros. El caos de la duda se apoderaba de la capital alemana. Escuchar era más seguro, hablar era un riesgo. De casa en casa, de ventana en ventana, las noticias en la radio, aquellas arengas en alabanza de la pureza, se habían convertido en la banda sonora habitual de la ciudad. Alemania para los alemanes. ¿Y yo no soy alemana también?, quiso preguntar. Caminando sin rumbo fijo, terminó en la Fasanenstraße. Al darse cuenta de que estaba muy cerca de la sinagoga, cruzó a la acera de enfrente. En otra esquina, se sorprendió al ver dalias. As she walked alone, she noticed her neighbors avoiding one another. Everyone seemed to be superstitiously whispering and eavesdropping. The chaos of doubt was gripping the German capital. It was safer to listen, for speaking carried risks. From house to house, window to window, the news on the radio, those harangues in praise of purity had become the city's daily soundtrack. Germany for the Germans. I am not a German too? She wanted to ask. Eventually, she found herself in Fasanenstraße. Realizing she was close to the synagogue, she crossed to the opposite side of the street. On the next corner, she was surprised to see dahlias outside a flower shop. She rejoiced in this shock of color amid the gray, drab city that had become devoid of life.
Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. Good Reading Magazine is a monthly publication dedicated to books and reading, and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. Hello and welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. My name's Greg Dobbs. Today I'm talking to Armando Lucas Correa. Armando is a journalist and the editor of People en Español. He was born and grew up in Cuba, but now lives in New York. He's the author of the international bestseller The German Girl, now translated into 13 languages. But today we're talking about Armando's new book, The Daughter's Tale. Armando, welcome to Sydney and congratulations on a wonderful book.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Armando, The Daughter's Tale and your previous book, The German Girl, share a Cuban thread. Did The Daughter's Tale develop from ideas in The German Girl?
Yes, I think everything started with the St. Louis, this ocean liner leaving Nazi Germany with over 900 Jewish refugees, all of them with permit of disembark. And they arrived in Cuba May 27, 1939. And the president of Cuba at that moment, Laredo Bru, requested another $500 per passenger. They left Cuba on June 2nd. They tried to go to United States, and President Roosevelt denied the entrance, as well as Prime Minister Mackenzie from Canada. They went back to Europe, and they found refuge in France, Belgium, Holland, and Great Britain. The war started in September, and most of them ended in Auschwitz. I heard the story for the first time when I was 10 years old, living in Cuba. My grandmother, I remember her during May saying that for the next 100 years, Cuba is going to pay very dearly because of what they did to the Jewish refugees. And when I went to college, I tried to find more information about the St. Louis. I went to the National Archive, and a librarian there's whispering me, like there used to be like 4 boxes labeled with the St. Louis, and all of them disappeared during the 70s. My grandmother was pregnant with my mom when the boat arrived in Havana. I think that's one of the reasons it's always in her mind. And she's a daughter of a Spanish immigrant. And then when I arrived in the United States in 1991, working for the Herald, I'm a journalist, and I researched and start buying books, documents, postcards, mugs, plates from the St. Louis. I was obsessed with the story. I found a postcard from Orador-sur-Glane, this small village in the south of France that one day, in a beautiful Saturday morning in 1944, the Nazi arrived. They always be in the big city, never in the small village. And they order all the population to go to the square. They put it inside the church, and they burned down the church with all of them. They killed over 600, most of them women and children. Doing the research, I have a lot of information I need to figure out. It's going to be everything in the German Girl, and then talking to my editor, we decided to do like a trilogy. And that day, the Dorestelle was born.
That was going to be my next question. Is it a trilogy? When do we expect the third installment of this trilogy?
I was doing a lot of book signing in Sydney, and everybody's asking, well, when we're going to receive the next book. But I need another 2 years to finish. I have been working for all these 3 books for the last 15 years of my life. But I think this is going to be the end, and it's going to be called The Night Traveler. And going again to another part of the history that we tend to forget or put on the side. Because I always said that it's easy to say that Hitler killed over 6 million of Jewish, but when you said that part of the tragedy, like the St. Louis, Cuba, United States, and Canada was part of the tragedy, we prefer to forget.
Everybody bears some of the guilt.
Exactly, yeah. And it's the same with the Orador-sur-Glane, because it was the Nazi who ordered the massacre, but with the help of the police, French policemen,
Was it a natural transition for you from journalism to historical fiction?
I think I always loved to write, and I remember, be a teenager and writing short stories, poems, whatever. All the teenagers that love reading, because I was an avid reader, And my major was in theater and dance critic. I started working in a theater magazine, and then because I am a Cuban refugee, living in United States, I had to reinvent myself. And working at the Herald, it was like going back to college, learning journalism in the States and America. It's completely different. I read and write. That's my daily process. And then when I moved to New York, I published my first book. It's called In Search of Emma. It's a non-fiction book that is only in Spanish. It's going to be in English next year, about how I create my family with the help of a surrogate mother and an egg donor. And then an editor from Simon & Schuster in New York read the book. She reads in Spanish. And she said, Armando, you have to write a novel. And he said, Johanna, every writer has a novel in the drawer or under the bed. We said it in Spanish. And I presented the idea of the St. Louis and this conflict of identity and trying to find who you are and your past, and she loved the story. And then we started working, because to sign the contract for the book, I need to have the first sentence in my mind.
The first chapter, I think.
Exactly, yeah. I show a couple of chapters. I remember it was the last one, the one when the fathers go to Manhattan and disappear. It was September 11. But I need to have my first sentence. For me, it's important. Even when I sign for the next 2 books, I have my first sentence already. I have to have it. And then I requested another 3 months working on the first sentence. At the beginning, it was like a couple of paragraphs, and then a paragraph, and then 1 sentence. It was like more or less, it's like, I'm going to be 12 years old, and I decided to kill my parents. And then I signed the contract.
Your first 2 books are set mostly in Europe, although also in Canada and the US, or they develop from the consequences of events in Europe. But you're originally from Cuba. Why European historical fiction?
Even I'm Cuban, I'm not Jewish. I think so. And I always obsessed with this kind of part of the history that we read a lot. We always see movies related. But for me, it's always I have in my mind, because the Holocaust or the Second World War, for me, happened yesterday. It's something very close. If I talk to my children, they are 13 years old and 9 years old. They think that the Holocaust happened like 3,000 years. It's the same equivalent. Yeah. And then when I talk to them, even for me, I always thinking and always have the question, how this happened in the most civilized continent in the world. It was not in Africa, when one of the crazy countries in Latin America.
Supposedly one of the technologically and culturally advanced countries
No, it
in the
was in
world.
the most civilized country in Europe, And then, why this happened? My daughter, when she read The German Girl, that was a question. And then I am a journalist. I always thinking maybe why I don't do like a non-fiction with all these interviews that I have with the survivors and talking to the historians and have all these pictures and documents. But at the same time, there is a lot of books about the St. Louis, and nobody knows about the St. Louis. And when I presented my idea to the Simon & Schuster editor, most of them, they're Jewish. They don't know about the St. Louis. Think about it. It was 2009 that President Obama invited the survivors to the Congress, and he did a kind of apology. And it was last year, I'm talking about 79 years later, that Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, I helped the office of him to bring all these survivors to Canada, and he did an apology in the House of Commons. It took like 79 years. So why? I am obsessed with that. That's the reason I decided to do like historical fiction, go to all these fictional characters, because you're going to have a better emotional connection.
I suppose the best way to teach people about history
Exactly,
is to write fiction about
look
it.
Look at what happened now. Chernobyl
Yep.
happened in the 80s, and we know the problem with the nuclear plant. You have to wait until the series in HBO that it changed the mentality and opened a new dialogue. A fictional series produced in England and have been watched for hundreds of millions of people in the last month.
Fiction seems to spark people's imaginations, I guess, and their interest.
I think you have to create an emotional connection. You have to see reading is like going to college. If you're doing non-fiction, it's like you're doing to college and trying to learn something fast and forgetting the next day. With this character, you are talking about life, real life, and then, I think so.
Identity and dislocation are two strong themes in The Daughter's Tale and in The German Girl. Sometimes the characters have to choose between identities or change their identity and where they live in order to survive. Mm-hmm. And your characters seem to be constantly exploring the things that define identity, things like place, profession, family lineage, and even loyalty. Is there something personal in these themes for you?
I think so. My great-grandparents from both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, they came from Spain, and they have to create a new persona, even a new name. When the last name of my grandmother, it was completely different, because when you arrive in a new country, they put the name whatever they want to put it, or maybe shorter. And I'm a Cuban refugee. I have to reinvent myself, learn a new language, a new profession, create a family. And sometimes I don't know who I am. That's happened when you are a refugee. And most of the Jewish refugees who arrive in Cuba, they have to Hispanicize their last name. That's typical. If you're Rosenthal, you became a Rosen. If you are Hannah, became Anna. You create a new persona. I remember I wrote a short story when I was a teenager about how many souls you have in one body. And then when you're growing up, you can go for the bad way, or the wrong way, yes, or the good way. And then you're creating, with all these people that you have inside, you are creating one. And I think that's the narrative for both books.
All your characters seem to undergo these kinds of changes. The character of Lena becomes Elise, and even Amanda, one of the first characters that appears in the book, she is German, but she's Jewish. She looks German, but she's Jewish, and she gets treated as a German sometimes.
And at the beginning, she thinks she's more German than Jewish.
That's right. Yes, so it's very confusing for her. And towards the end, there's also this identity by association. The French people in the village that you speak of, when they associated with the Germans, became the Boche, the enemies of the French people.
Yeah.
So these themes seem to resonate right through the book, and I see now that it's part of you.
Exactly. You are creating all these people that you have inside, and you create the best way that you can to survive, and at the same time forgetting all the time. You have to forget to survive. And that's always something that for me was strong. When I left my country, my family, even someone asked me today, do you miss your family when you are traveling, too many days, my children? So I never think about it. You know why? Because I don't want to be depressed. I'm living right now. I'm talking to you, and this is the most important part right now. If I'm thinking, oh my God, I want to see my children, I have to be with them, I go to bed, I'm never gonna wake up. Their living room was a kind of garden bordered by a wall of literature. Brocade curtains with floral patterns, tapestry showing bucolic scenes, carpets as thick as newly mown grass, and every spare surface occupied by books. Over dinner, Amanda made polite conversation so that Julius wouldn't return to the most pressing topic. She told him she had sold an encyclopedia, that someone had ordered a collection of Greek classics, that Fraulein Hilde Kramer, her favorite customer, had not been by the bookstore for a week now, whereas previously she would come after teaching her classes and spend hours browsing the shelves without ever buying anything. First thing tomorrow, clear up the shop window, Julius demanded. When he saw how his stern voice made Amanda recoil, he went over and pulled her to him for an instant. He leaned his head against her chest and breathed in the perfume of his wife's freshly washed hair.
Both The Daughter's Tale and The German Girl were written in Spanish. Mm-hmm. Does this process of translation present any anxiety for you? And do you worry that anything might be lost in the translation?
Yeah. Well, I write it in Spanish. This is my language. And I remember when I finished The German Girl, my editor said, we need to find the perfect translation for you. Because if you read my book, you see that I have a voice, sometimes lyrical, sometimes a lot of metaphor, and creating all this atmosphere, around the characters. And then she sent me 3 tests, only labeled with number 1, 2, and 3. And I said to her, number 3 is the only one who can translate my book. And she said, Armando, he's the most expensive one. He lives in London, and he have to choose you. He have to read the book, and if he likes the book, then he's gonna translate your book. And he's a translator. His name is Nick Castor, and he's a very famous translator from Spanish to English. And he's the translator for Isabel Allende, the Chilean writer, Pérez Reverte, all these big names in Hispanic. Thanks God, he decided to translate The German Girl and all my books, and he translated to The Daughter's Tale. And then I became his nightmare, because we have 6-hour difference, and we were talking at 9. And sometimes it was my night, sometimes it was his night.
So he inherited the anxiety.
Yeah, I think so. And I remember one of the boleros, the song for Cuban song from The German Girl, they have like a crazy title. It's Armando that doesn't have any sense in English. In Spanish neither. Yeah, I remember talking to him. And sometimes he's a good editor too. Sometimes he proposed some changes that I do in English, and working with the translation, I change in Spanish and go back again to him. It's a long process, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
I guess you have to, otherwise you'll go mad.
Yeah.
Your characters are also very conscious of the passing of time. Amanda waits for her husband to return. She watches over her sleeping daughters and lights candles as a kind of ritual in the evening. Mm-hmm. But it's especially obvious in the counting of breaths and heartbeats. Is this sense of vigil, of counting of time, is that a deliberate course of action for you, or does it just occur naturally as the narrative unfolds?
Yeah, at the beginning for the book, the title is going to be The Silence Between Us, talking about the silence between hearts. And during my research, I studied the electrocardiogram, and I almost became a cardiologist, believe me. I read a lot of books. Even if you show me your electrocardiogram, I can read it and can tell you.
Should I add it to your biography at the beginning?
Yeah, almost. And I love the idea of this guy, that he's like a ghost, because he appears only at the beginning and he's going to be present for the whole book. That when you are under stress or you are afraid, you have to count your heartbeats. And when the space between heartbeat 1 and 2 it's longer, you feel better. And then I love one of the reviewers from the New York Times. He did a great review for the Daughter's Tale. He mentioned that you read between heartbeats. The whole book you are reading between heartbeats. Yeah.
A section of the story is told through the voices of children. Where do you find the inspiration for those voices?
Yeah, when I started writing for the German girl mainly, I was not a father. I was this Cuban refugee, young, living in Miami, working for the Herald, writing obits for the paper. And everything changed when I have my first daughter in 2005. And I think even the style of the book changed completely. It was it was more emotional. After I have my children, I cry for everything. You tell me the story right now, I can start crying during the podcast. Yeah. I read and I write crying. I am very emotional. I have to have my children. And Emma is 13 years old. She's going to be 14 in November. And she gave voice to the Daughter's Tale. I remember at the beginning it was, I'm going to be 9 years old and decided to kill my parents. And then the next year is going to be 10 years old because Hannah was growing up with Emma at the same time. And most of the phrases that Hannah said in the book, they came from my daughter.
The children in the book go through a process of growing up too, don't they?
And for me, writing is I read and write. And it's around my family all the time. And I can remember some passages with my son, like right now he's 9.5, like we were 3 years old in Miami going to the beach. I have all this memory with my children and some passage and chapter of the books.
And somehow they find their way into these books.
And the smell, I very sensitive with the smell, and that's the reason you smell everything in the book, sometimes too much, my editor said. But in Cuba, it's very strong with the heat and the smell and the violets and the flower. And then, for me, it's part of my life. I remember Cuba with all the smell.
And that's another thread that runs through the book, the botanical thread, if you like, the flowers
the flower
that appear
the second one.
on the stationery.
Yeah, and I bought a couple of books from the 19th century with all this botanical flower. I went to Paris, to Limoges, and I have in my office. I think, but why do you have to spend money in this? I finished a book, I'm working a new one, but I have to have it. I need to feel it. I need to see the paper when the Amanda is going to write all these letters to her daughter. Yeah.
How do you divide your time between journalism and writing fiction?
My life is really hectic, I think, between the children, my full-time job as an editor, and writing. That's the reason I think I'm lucky, because every time that someone asks me what is the way to find a solution when you are blocked and you can write, that's a luxury for me. If I have a computer and time, I'm writing. My mind never stops. The only thing that I need is time. And I love to be under pressure. I think being a journalist, that it's important for a journalist, the deadline, I never miss a deadline, and accuracy. And then I have that rush with me when I'm writing, because I know I have to finish 500 words today. If not, I have to write 5,000 words during the weekend. I have to have a more flexible week. I need to write my 500s every day.
It's a time management thing.
Yeah. And then because I am lazy right now. I'm enjoying Australia, talking to you and coming back with the kids. But I need to go back. I think starting in July, I need to go back and writing my 500 words. If not, the night travel is going to be in 3 years.
And where to next for your writing, Armando? Europe, America, Cuba, Australia?
Well, there is one of the editors here in Simon & Schuster. She said, Armando, you have to write about Cuba, like family saga, and it's beginning in the 20th century until today. We need to read more about Cuba. And I always said that I am a late writer, and I started really late publishing, at least. Then I have a lot of chapters that I can play with them. That's the reason. If I don't have all the things that I have written already, I think my book is going to take like 10 years to finish. Because I always play with character, chapter, emotions, because I have thousands of pages written already.
Are we talking about 100 years of solitude from Cuba?
Yeah, I love to do that. I think Cuba needed a book like you can count, beginning after the war with Spain, the first day of the Republic, and then the revolution and what happened today, but I don't know the end. That's a problem when you're writing for a country that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow,
Armando, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining me today on the Good Reading Magazine podcast.
Thank you very much. I'll see you in 2 years with The Night Traveler.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been talking to Armando Lucas Correa about his new book, The Daughter's Tale. It's published by Simon & Schuster and is available at goodreadingmagazine.com.au and all good bookstores. My name is Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening.